Israel thrives on regional chaos, right? Israel is safer when Iraq is in chaos. Israel is safer when Syria is in chaos, or Libya is in chaos, or now Iran.
What's up, everybody? Jackson here. And I want to be upfront about this one before we even get into it. This clip has some genuinely useful, well-documented material in it about a real Florida law and a real congressman's public record, and it also has some conspiracy-driven anti-Semitic content mixed in that I'm not going to repeat or treat as a legitimate argument. Dan Bilzerian and former CIA officer John Kiriakou talk about Israeli-American policy, and Bilzerian's points eventually slide into claims about Jewish media control and a truly indefensible comment about Judaism and rape that I'll be direct about rejecting outright. But underneath that, there's a real, checkable story here. A Florida law criminalizing criticism of Israel signed in Jerusalem by Governor DeSantis and a sitting congressman, Randy Fine, who co-sponsored that exact law and then went on to make a series of documented, publicly posted statements about Muslims that arguably violate the spirit of the law. He wrote, "I want to separate the legitimate reporting from the conspiracy theory because conflating them does a disservice to the real story. Stick with me, get that like in, get subscribed, because we hold every part of this to account." Now let's get into it.
Is in chaos. What's the end game there? You can't have chaos all the time in perpetuity.
Well, I mean, if you accept their Greater Israel Project and that's what they want to do, it's hard to steal land without distractions. It allows justifications. Also, turmoil in the region distracts from what they're doing to the Palestinians. You know, and also they don't want peace. This idea that like, oh, you know, just let the Jews have this piece of land and, you know, everybody's attacking. It's just nonsense. Like, they're constantly the aggressors. And so I look at this and I'm just like, I don't know of any other country other than us that has bombed 7 different countries in a year, you know, other than Israel. So it's right. Like, I don't know. I don't think that they've ever wanted peace. They're a terrorist nation, and they're, you know, said this numerous times, founded by terrorists. And so, yeah, I think that as long as we are supporting them and allowing them to commit all these terrorist acts, I mean, they're going to continue to be arrogant assholes. They're going to be, you know, everybody acts like, oh, well, it's the only democracy in the region. And I'm like, they are the only terrorists in the region. They're causing all these problems. And Americans just they're just not familiar with it. And so it's been framed to them that, you know, Muslims are bad. You know, Israel's good.
You know, that's another thing I don't understand, too. You're right about that. Americans are led to believe that, just as a blanket statement, Muslims are bad. I spent much of my adult life in the Middle East. And, you know, our foreign relations with almost all of the Middle Eastern countries are very, very tight, very close and good. You know, we have a so-called special relationship with the Saudis. Whether that's true or not, that's what it's called. Our relations with Kuwait are very strong. Bahrain is the headquarters of the 5th Fleet. Qatar hosts the largest American Air Force base in the world. The UAE, I would argue that our relationship with the UAE is closer than it is with any of those other countries. The Omanis, we've turned to the Omanis for decades to be the middleman in our relations with, you know, the Iranians and with others. We're joined at the hip with the Egyptians, with the Moroccans, with the Tunisians. We have great, especially in American foreign policy. I just don't understand.
You want the honest answer? I mean, it's Jewish propaganda. That's really what it is. I mean, it comes from Hollywood. It's because every time, you know, growing up, you see terrorists. They're always Muslim. They always have, you know, a kiefa or, you know, whatever. And it's programming, man. Like, I was in the military. I did, you know, 3 months of boot camp, and in that 3 months, I changed dramatically. So what does 30 years of programming do to you? I always thought Muslims are a problem. I really did. Like growing up, I was like, especially when I was in the military, I'm like, oh, these Hajis, blah, blah, blah. They have all these names for them.
Yeah.
Some of which I can't say on air.
Yeah.
But they're bad and it dehumanizes them, right? And so when guys come back from war, guys that I went through, training with, whatever, come back and, brag about, these Muslims they killed, it's kind of like a badge of honor, and it's a way to justify the things that they did. And I really believe that a lot of the PTSD comes from coming back and realizing, like, maybe these weren't the bad guys, and Rob O'Neill talked about that. Actually, I heard him on one podcast where he kicked in the door of some guy's house, bedroom, whatever, and guy went for a gun and he shot him, and he was thinking about that. He's like, hey, what if that had been me? What would I have done? I would have grabbed my gun and, he would have shot me. And what if I had something in common with that guy? And what if we would have, had a laugh over coffee and whatever? And it's like, would he have grabbed that gun if I didn't kick the door in of his bedroom? And why did I kick the door in his, you know what I mean? Like, you start asking yourself these questions. I mean, Muslims have always treated me with respect, I'm sure there's bad ones, and everybody wants to look at like, oh, but the Muslim rape gangs in the UK and Europe and everything else. And that's, once again, it's kind of pushing this narrative. And it's like, yes, Muslims are for sure causing problems over there, but no different than the Mexicans coming across the border, and they're mostly Christian, and the Ethiopians coming from Ethiopia, they're mostly, I mean, Africa is mostly Christian, right? And it's not because they believe in Jesus or they're, came over with their Bible, they're causing problems. No, it's because they're poor and they're coming from a country that, doesn't have strong culture. They have no affinity to the new, country or state or wherever they're going into. And so that, to me, is the source of the problem. It's not because they read the Quran. I've read parts of the Quran, and I mean, I've talked to a lot of Muslims, and rape is against, their religion in any way, shape, or form. So the only religion I've actually seen where rape is excused is in Judaism.
Legislature, a bill making it a criminal offense to criticize Israel. A criminal offense. Obviously, clearly unconstitutional. So it'll have to work its way through the courts. But right now, it is a felony to criticize Israel. So I happened to be here about 4 weeks ago, and a woman just nearby the studio in Miami Beach wrote a Facebook post criticizing Israel on purpose. The very next day, police. Did you post this thing in Israel on Facebook criticizing Israel? She said, yes, I did. You're under arrest. Well, not only did the Florida legislature pass this ridiculous bill into law, Governor DeSantis didn't sign it right away. Instead, once it was passed, he flew to Israel, signed it in the presence of Benjamin Netanyahu, and then gave Netanyahu the pen as a souvenir. I'm confused as to what country I'm living in these days.
Yeah, it's almost like a humiliation ritual. I mean, Randy Fine was supportive of that as well. I mean, he helped pass the anti-Semitism laws. And it's the crazy thing is, if you were to say the things that he say about Muslims, about Jews, you would be in jail.
Oh, yeah. I'd be in jail.
70% of this district is 55 years and older. And, they got propagandized with this Israel's our greatest ally, like blah, 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 blah. They still think it's like, oh, just right against the left. And if we get rid of these liberals, then we're going to be fine. And it's like, I get it. Like, the liberals are crazy. Their talking points are nuts.
Yeah.
But I also look at it from a honest lens of like, where is that coming from? That it's coming from the Jewish media that's telling them these crazy things. And I know that's like another thing that, oh my gosh, you can't say that. But like, it's no secret who owns most of the media. And so, I just think there has to be responsibility. I mean, if Muslims own the media and they were doing this, we would be going nuts.
Yeah.
But this message is not coming from Muslims. It's not coming from Christians. And so, I'm just calling it out. We're like a battered wife. It's like, what are we doing?
Right.
They keep screwing us over. They sell our secrets. They steal our uranium. Like, how many times can this country screw us over? They want to treat it like, every Jew is a part of the tribe and is protected. And if you say one thing about this Jew, you're saying about all Jews. And if you say something about Israel, you're saying it about all Jews. So they're actually the ones that are pushing this narrative of a monolith. It's not us. It's like, it's them. Because, the fact that they would coin that, any criticism of Israel as anti-Semitic literally says that they are saying that if you criticize this country, you're criticizing all Jews. So it's weird. It's, once again, this hypocrisy of like, they can say these things, but if you say it, you're an anti-Semite.
I went on the Piers Morgan show the other day. I've been something of a regular on that show. Piers, you cannot have as a policy to just kill everybody. That's not a policy. That's called genocide. There's a word for that. You cannot kill everybody.
Yeah, well, especially when they allowed that to happen and they funded Hamas, and we can go into all
And
that.
there
stuff.
were they funded Hamas, number one, and that's a proven fact. That was a policy decision taken by Benjamin Netanyahu. But number two, there were weeks full of intelligence indicating that an attack was coming. And Itamar Ben-Gvir, who's supposed to be the big mastermind of security in Israel and who's really just a war criminal, said
he's
no.
The worst, by the way.
The worst of the worst.
He's worse than Netanyahu.
Yeah, he is. He's worse. He's worse. But he insisted that the attack was coming in the West Bank. And I believe that the man is not that stupid. He knew it was coming in Gaza, and they were looking for something that would allow them to just kill everybody.
100%. And, it's shown in their response time. 6 hours to respond to that, and then when they do respond, they kill their own citizens, pump up the numbers.
Right.
And so I'm glad that you didn't cave to that, because I think that what they try and do is establish a framework of like, okay, Hamas are terrorists, that makes them the bad guys,
right?
So then Israel's the good guys, right? And they want to just make this very black and white. I'm glad that you didn't fall into that trap, because it's an easy one to fall into. Is just saying, oh, yes, I accept that Hamas is really bad. If you really kind of look at it objectively, I think it was over 400 Palestinian civilians were killed in Gaza.
Let me be direct first. Claims that Jewish people control the media or that any religious text excuses a specific violent crime are anti-Semitic conspiracy theories with a long, ugly history, not legitimate political arguments, and I'm not going to present them as one side of a fair debate. Naming that isn't about protecting anyone from criticism, it's about accuracy, criticizing the actions of the Israeli government or of specific American politicians who support it, is fair political speech. Attributing those actions to a global ethnic or religious conspiracy is a different thing entirely, and it's worth being able to tell those two things apart clearly, which is exactly what the narrator in this clip does at the end, and which I'll do here too. Now, the actual documented material, which stands entirely on its own without needing any conspiracy framing, Florida's House Bill 269, which elevates religiously or ethnically motivated harassment from a misdemeanor to a felony, was reportedly signed by Governor DeSantis not in Florida but in Jerusalem at the Museum of Tolerance with Prime Minister Netanyahu present. If that's accurate, and it's the kind of specific, dated event worth verifying directly against contemporaneous reporting, that's a genuinely unusual choice for signing state legislation, and it's fair to ask why. The more serious material involves Congressman Randy Fine, who reportedly co-sponsored that same bill and personally delivered it to Jerusalem. The clip lists a series of specific, dated public statements attributed to him, calling a sitting congresswoman a Muslim terrorist, writing "starve away" under images of starving children, telling a constituent to harm himself, and posting that we need more Islamophobia, not less. If these are accurate and verifiable, that's about as direct a contradiction as you can get between an anti-harassment law's stated purpose and its own author's subsequent public conduct, and it deserves to be checked against his actual public statements and posts, rather than taken secondhand from any commentary, including this one. On the campaign finance figures, specific dollar amounts from AIPAC, the Republican Jewish Coalition, and NORPAC, along with corporate PAC contributions. Those are the kind of numbers that should be verifiable directly through FEC filings, and if accurate, they're a legitimate and specific data point about who funds a specific politician's campaigns. That's standard campaign finance reporting, applicable to any politician funded by any interest group, and treating it as suspicious only when it involves a specific ethnic or religious lobby, rather than treating all concentrated donor influence with the same scrutiny, is itself worth being careful about. Here's the through line I'd leave you with. There's a real, well-documented story here about a specific law, a specific politician's documented public statements, and specific, checkable campaign finance filings. That story doesn't need conspiracy theories about media control or religious slurs to be damning on its own terms. When a real story gets tangled up with conspiratorial framing, the conspiracy theory doesn't strengthen the real story. It gives everyone involved an easy way to dismiss the whole thing, stick to what's actually documented, and it holds up just fine by itself. So tell me, do you think a politician's own documented public statements matter more here than any question about who funds them, or are both worth scrutinizing on their own separate terms? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more of these breakdowns that separate the real receipts from the conspiracy noise, get subscribed, because that's exactly what this channel is here for.